welcome to another edition of the PRC Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 12. My name is Jake, and I'm your host. We weren't on here last week, as you know. We wanted to do a show, but it just didn't work out. Apologies for us being so inactive recently. We've only had 2 shows in the last month, basically. I promise it's not just been laziness. The schedule just hasn't been good, and it wasn't ideal for this week, really, as I'll explain in a second, but we'll find a way to make it work. I will say in our defense, there hasn't exactly been a lot of new storylines to crop up since we were last here. I mean, Truex is still on fire, Denny is still Denny, race control still sucks, blah, 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 but we've definitely got enough to do a show today, so it should be fine. As always, my friend and colleague Ryan of RJM Analytics is here. Unfortunately,
I won't get fined.
Yep. Unfortunately, we are once again guestless this week. Everyone in our rotation had something going on, so it'll once again just be us. Our last show like this went pretty well, though, so hopefully today is the same. Nonetheless, sorry about that, just the way the ball bounces sometimes. Hopefully it's still entertaining for you guys. Now, I'll admit, neither of us are really eager to talk about what happened on Sunday for fairly obvious reasons. And to be honest, there really isn't much, if anything, new to add what we've already said in the past on here when it comes to either of the parties involved. And so we'll try not to spend too much time on it, but it is the big story of the week, so I guess we have to talk about it some. So I'll let Ryan here start us off, I guess. Let the vitriol flow.
I mean, what is there to say that Kyle Petty didn't already say? I mean, he's never in the wrong. Just ask him. Always somehow he's the victim. The whole rest of the world is always out to get him and trying to make him look like the bad guy. And, you know, there's just fewer things that can incite such a visceral rage in me more than when someone's clearly in the wrong, clearly did something they shouldn't have, whether it's intentional or not, and then tries to cover their ass by playing themselves up as, you know, this anti-establishment martyr who, you know, people just want to have a narrative against them. And I don't care who you are, whether we're talking about a politician or some, you know, megalomaniac businessman or even a certain sports coach who until very recently I thought I had nothing but respect for. But, you know, people who act like this, one thing they all have in common is they have just these cult-like followings who fed their egos to the point where they think they're at some sort of level above humanity, and they act like, because they know it's how they can rile people up to be even more defensive of them and, you know, think they're saving the world from whatever evil powers that be, that they can just act however they want. And it's calculated, it's manipulative, and there's zero doubt in my mind that a big part of the reason he acts this way and how he uses up Larson like that twice in the same year is because he knows he won't fight back. I mean, we saw how he reacted at Vegas last year. He took it like a champ. Now, whether that's because he's just a good sport or whether it's because he's like 5 feet tall and 120 pounds, I mean, who knows? But it takes a real beta male to pick on the guy you know won't fight back. And I'm impressed Larson even did what he did under caution, but it's better than nothing, but it's still not enough. I mean, he should have made sure he ruined his race. At the very least, that his car wouldn't be able to compete for the win, even if it means, you know, another week of this narcissist victim complex and probably demanding Larson be suspended. I mean, that's what people need to do to him until he learns his fucking lesson.
I'll say my little bit about Denny's part of it and then get to Kyle next. But I pretty much said everything that really was relevant or that I have to say about him or what I think of him after the Phoenix show. Other than, you know, it's part of why. Now, it's not the reason why, you know, he's been acting this way after that, but it's probably part of it. I did not like when NASCAR did what they did after Phoenix with the penalty that they handed out to him. Not because I thought that he didn't deserve it or whatever, or that it was a good thing for him to do, but just because it's good. From now on, you are not going to get anything out of him. And this was the prime example. He's still, you know, 2.5 days later, claims that he and Kyle Larson didn't make contact in the turn in that instant. I mean, you know, I don't know what else, you know, how many angles that you have to watch to show that that's not true and that he's full of shit, but there you go. You know, he's not even going to admit that. I mean, he'd probably still be fine even if he just said, well, that's racing. I got into him, and it sucks what happened to him. But no, he can't even do that. He's got to just make out like they didn't make contact. I mean, when everybody could see what happened. Stevie Wonder could have seen what happened in the turn there at that. And I'm not really going to talk about the incident itself much more than that because it's already been talked about enough by enough people, and there's been enough reaction to it. It's very self-explanatory. And there's not much more for me to really add than that.
Yeah, like I said, it's just delusional behavior from a guy who clearly just lives in a world of his own and gets enabled to act like that because every time he's involved in a controversy, there's these devil's advocate people who just go like, oh, well, he's good for the sport and he speaks his mind and he has personality. And yeah, no, I'm sorry, we don't need personalities like him around. And then, yeah, as for Larson, I mean, just like I said, he needs to stand up for himself, not be this, kind of, oh, well, he's my friend, and, well, whatever. And the other thing I need to bring up is just, and it's kind of regarding a topic that I know people have some controversial opinions on, but, it feels like people all of a sudden want to paint Larson as this, dirty driver, and we've gone over this a couple times before, but I have no clue when or how this started, but it's like something that now gets brought up every time Larson's involved in something, usually on the receiving end of it, is, all these edgy little kids on Twitter now all of a sudden want to rehash a certain incident that he got in trouble for a few years ago that was, just to use it as basically some moral crutch to hide behind and justify siding against him. And I have no idea why this is becoming a thing now, because it felt like, in 2021 when he came back, all we ever heard out of anyone was how he was this racing deity and people needed to get over themselves and appreciate him. Then last year he wasn't really quite as relevant, but now he's having a great season where it seems like every other week someone's using him up, and people, for whatever reason, want to drudge up the N-word thing again. And I mean, take this from someone who pretty much stopped rooting for him for a while because of that, who couldn't stand seeing him win every week 2 years ago because it felt like he benefited from that whole situation. But by all accounts, he made a mistake, an incredibly stupid and indefensible mistake, but he apologized, served his consequences, and genuinely learned from it. But you know who that can't be said about? If we're playing this whole moral high horse game, yeah, if we're going to bring up the N-word thing, let's talk about the other guy involved in all this. The guy who cheated on his pregnant girlfriend with prostitutes, and then his baby mama a few years ago accused him of doing some vague, awful things to her, and then suspiciously deleted her social media because somebody shut her up. And never has he faced any sort of consequences for that at all. He's never even had to answer questions about it from the media or anything. It all just got totally swept under the rug. Nobody ever dares to bring it up, and to me, that's one of the most disgusting miscarriages of justice in recent NASCAR memory. So, if you want to talk about a bad human being, Denny Hamlin is a bad human being. He's never been held accountable for any of the garbage he's done on or off the track. He's never shown any remorse whatsoever, and to quote Robbie Gordon, he's a piece of shit.
Well said. I'm not one of these people myself that thinks that I don't want to go there with this. I think you know what I mean, but I'm not one of these people that crucifies people for things that they've done in the past or wants to see them treated unfairly because of it or whatever. But you're right that he doesn't even seem to face questions about it when other people get questions for far, far less, sometimes when it's not even warranted. It is frustrating and maddening, but my only explanation for it is that he's rich, he's got a lot of money, he's got a lot of influence and power in the garage that he holds over people, probably that he holds over their heads, and that's why probably a lot of people are unafraid to speak about him. And we have to face the fact that, I mean, not in some ways, but in general, unfortunately, Denny Hamlin is a very intelligent person. When he has what you could call the narcissist charm to a lot of people. If he's one of those people, to us that are sitting at a distance, we can kind of, I guess, fairly easily see the way he is. But tell he's the kind of person that if you talk to him, he'd actually be pretty interesting to have a conversation with. He's a lot more intelligent than a lot of these other drivers, which, I'll reference one later. I almost wonder how some of these drivers could even function from day to day with, you hear the way they talk. And, he can be very charming if he wants to be, but the problem is that masks a very malevolent and deviant side, as it so often does with narcissists and types of people like him. And, that fools a lot of people. I mean, we're not fooled by it, but you can see where it could get a lot of people. And so it's just that way. Not much more to say about it, really.
Yeah, I think I said my piece on the Mickey Mouse winner this weekend. Overall, though, I guess it was not really that great of a race, honestly. I think people, it seems like everybody's talking about the finish being exciting and dramatic and all that, and I saw, the Blue Cat poll got like an 85% yes on is it a good race, but I didn't see a whole lot of it because I was on a train with shitty train Wi-Fi and the stream kept freezing. But from what I saw, it was like nobody could pass except after restarts, and guys just kept forgetting how to drive and wrecking people, and it just had no flow to it. I mean, am I wrong in that?
Yeah, right? Mostly right about it. Yeah, and I'll definitely talk about the race in general in a minute, but just to get to my Larson's point, I mean, again, there's not a whole lot new to add there either that we kind of didn't already say. Like you mentioned, referenced a bunch of stuff that we talked about after the Bristol Dirt race, or actually it was after Martinsville that happened. I think that show with that whole incident we had with Priest, which is someone else that I might get to later, where there's been this vilification of him, this retroactive history that people are applying to him, where somehow he's this dirty driver, or at least is someone that's way too aggressive a majority of the time. And it's just, I mean, look, I'm biased, as a fan of his, but really, other than the incident with Chase at Fontana last year, which was mostly his stupid spotter's fault more than anything, I don't see what he's really ever done that's been that egregious in any kind of points race.
Win and drive for Hendrick. That's what he does wrong.
Yeah, true. But, and he's been the way, it's not just before, the incident either. I mean, he's always been very fair and has, been very mature in how he handles when someone has wronged him. I mean, going all the way back to his rookie season when Ryan Newman punted him out of the way to advance in the chase and make the Final Four, which he absolutely did not deserve to do. And he handled that well. He's handled many other incidents well, just like, the Bubba thing last year when he went nuclear on him and handled it as basically as classily as you could have. And this year, I mean, by my count, this was the 7th time this season where he has directly been taken out by someone in a race that he could have been in contention. And that's not even counting.
It happened twice. I mean, earlier, Christopher Bell just completely drove over him.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Kind of helped him.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. I was almost going to forget that. I wanted to mention it, but I actually hadn't thought of it in a couple minutes. But yes, I mean, it happened in the same race. It had Christopher Bell, who, at this point, to be honest, I'm not even sure that he's capable of wiping his own ass, with the way he drives sometimes and how overrated he is. I'm sorry, that's just what I think. He complete dumbass running in turn 1 and just doesn't push Larson down the straightaway when it could have helped him, but he waits all the way until they get in the corner and takes him out. We saw, and then he ended up taking himself out later.
Handed Larson a stage win, which was hilarious.
Yes, exactly. And so that was twice that it happened in the same race, and like I said, the 7th time that it's happened, and that's not even counting.
It happened twice in Kansas too, right?
Yeah.
Like on the very first lap.
Yeah. Actually, that would make it 8 because I didn't even remember that one. That's not even counting the indirect times that it's happened or times where it's happened in races that he wasn't as competitive in. And that's not including last year, the incident with Bubba. I mean, it's just been one thing after another. I mean, you could point out like the incident and a half you could say with Chase last year. But even if you do, that makes the score like 2-12 or 14 in the last year or whatever. I mean, but no, just like you had Gabe Hart saying right after the fact, while the race was still going on, I know he's your buddy, man, but the shit he does, I mean, good grief. I don't even, know what to say about it anymore. I'm tired of him getting run over like this and getting, treated as this just demon. But we already went over that mostly in the past. But basically, to bounce off of what you said earlier, I mean, on one hand, I appreciate the fact that he's very good natured and he's a nice guy that tries to turn the other cheek, which is what you should do as a human being. Most of the time when somebody does something against you. But I wanted to throw up on my mouth when he kept saying, but he's my friend, he's my buddy. Like, no, just find better friends, find better buddies. This guy is just taking you for a fool. Like, stop that. And I don't know what his reaction, if he's going to ever do anything back to him or not. I don't know. Maybe it'll just involve him winning without having to do anything and beating him. I'd be fine with that. But, the only thing that kept me from being in a total rage about it, that lasted beyond probably like half an hour or so, was I do have this kind of overarching feeling that at some point, he may not pay for it directly, but in the end, it seems like Danny always finds a way to humiliate himself and make everything he's accomplished void from beforehand. And I don't feel much reason to think that it will not be that way this time. So I'm looking forward to that moment whenever it comes.
I'm not sure how it can get any more humiliating than the way things ended between him and Ross last year, but I guess I'll just say, Jordan Fish, if you're in danger, blink twice.
Yep. And last thing I'll say, I'm not going to say it during the predictions later, but hopefully this trend that's been happening of Larson winning the next week after he's been, wronged or someone throwing a hissy fit against him, like at Bubba last year when that happened and Bubba got suspended, Larson just completely owned the field like no one else did last season at Homestead. And then after Ryan Preece threw his hissy fit at Bristol this year, he actually led the first quarter of that race, only to speed for no reason, and then watch Larson win the next week. So hopefully that trend continues this week and whatever. But as far as the race itself in general, I don't really have a whole lot to add to what Ryan said. It was a slightly better version of Gateway, I would say, where, there was a little bit more action, but not much. I will say, normally the cautions would have been a big drag. And to an extent, it still did kind of make the race feel a bit more of a drag. Couldn't think of a synonym there, but it did work out in the sense that they were timed correctly to where it actually did bring in some interesting strategy plays into the race, which normally we don't see that at Pocono anymore because of the stages, which usually basically lock you into two strategies.
I was going to bring that up. I feel like, any track where you can pit under green and not lose a lap needs to get rid of stage cautions. Like the super speedways, they're totally pointless there. And Pocono and Indy, if they ever go back to the oval, it's just. I guess yesterday was better than a lot of races there have been, but it still just feels like there's basically two strategies that people can do, and just like all the road courses last year, it's you pit before the stage or you pit during the stage caution, and it's so artificial. And I say this as somebody who generally likes stages because I think it's good that they give weight to performance during the race, but they don't really need the cautions anywhere, I don't think, and especially not at these big tracks where it just totally fucks up the running order.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, they made the right choice in doing it for the road courses this year, but since Pocono is sort of like a road course in that sense that you don't get lapped a lot of times when you make a pit stop on the green, it would help it too. But we only go there once a year anyway, so I don't think it's going to happen, but whatever. But the strategy did make it more interesting in the second half after a completely dull and uninteresting first half. But that was really just down to how the yellows played out. They happened to come out at the right times, which allowed the strategy game to open up and teams to do different things. Like Larson, getting ahead by taking two tires, the call that Cliff Daniels made, and some other guys made some, did some fuel only. Some guys took 4 tires, and there was a whole mess of different strategies. And so that did create some more excitement at the end, and, it may very well have been an exciting finish until, well, we know what happened. We already talked about it, so don't need to say any more.
Yeah.
Outside of that, honestly, the most entertaining thing was something that we didn't even get to see until after. It was Joey Logano cussing out the guy that he was trying to get to tow his car after he got wrecked early in the race. That was more entertaining than just about anything else that happened on the track on Sunday.
Most entertaining thing to me was Ace of Spades, rich kid, basically trying to throw his helmet at Reddick and like missing terribly.
Yeah, that was Carl Lewis level throw.
It was, yeah.
And
I mean, I thought, like, I don't know how this has happened, but it's like 2 years ago, I actually thought he was, a decent driver, and he was. I mean, he was like a guy who could contend to make the playoffs on points most years, and it just feels like these past 2 years, he's just totally devolved into this. Maybe he has one or two great races a year, and then besides that, just runs way behind his teammate, and then does clown shit like this. That's just, I mean, come on, man.
But he needs to start wrecking more guys, though. That we know that's the answer. I believe that what. Sorry, go ahead.
The best part was like that was not even Reddick's fault. He cut down right in front of him. So.
Yeah, so I believe Kyle Busch has beaten them in all but one race they both finished this year. Now, I may be wrong on that, but last I knew, that was the way it was this year, which that just shows you how big the disparity is. But
Todd could tell us he's listening right now.
But, really the less said about him, the better, though. He's not really worth talking about or really relevant enough.
Yep.
Yeah, and I guess maybe to get out the last of our grievances, I mean, maybe I'll let you start about. We already talked about him mostly, but I guess Ryan Preece, this little pissant rears his ugly head again. I mean, if you want to say something, I guess go ahead.
I don't know. He's just the most irrelevant 25th place driver I've ever seen at this point who has an ego as big as he does. And, I mean, it all started when he signed with, Kevy Wevy. And it seems like now he just wants to be like a really, really poverty version of him. Or every week he's trying to attack somebody after the race, or I mean, for him to make Michael McDowell look like the good guy in an incident last week, that says a lot. And he's had 3 or 4 different incidents like that this year. And going back to last year with bitching about Hocevar in that truck race, it's like, I don't know. Thankfully, he's not really relevant enough to care about, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, it hit a little closer to home to me because obviously I'm a Corey LaJoie fan, and, I've already been really frustrated with a bunch of developments that's been going on with him recently, which aren't really even worth going into, but, that was just like the icing on the cake. Like, he has, potentially good run, ruined in a couple of different times, and then, I guess... was no great angle of exactly what happened, but I guess he got into him and cost Preece a 27th place finish, and so Preece goes up and just does a Clint Boyer on Newman at the All-Star race and just starts just cussing him out and trying to attack him while he's still in his race car, and just real alpha male stuff right there. And like I said, I didn't think I could ever be this sick of someone that's a 28th place driver. But I am. This guy's, his act got old really fast. The way he got made out to be basically a hero after the fit that he threw at Bristol, only to humiliate himself completely the next week, and all the other stuff he's done, and then this week, it's just really old. I mean, and this, he's mad that he's getting beat by this same guy that is racing for a team that has about 20 employees total, where the team that Preece is racing for has well over 100 employees. So, I guess that's probably the main source of his rage. And beyond that, it's just, there was someone on Reddit that made a really good post that said, well, he looked like the definition of a dude that needs to be in anger management class. Can't really say it better myself. But again, really don't need to say any more about him. That's giving him more attention than he probably deserves. So whatever you want to talk about next, we'll go there. I promise we're not always this angry, but we just had a lot of stuff we need to get out.
Yeah. I did not see any of the other races this past weekend. I was on vacation somewhere, so totally missed the the Xfinity shit show. Actually, I did see the end of the truck race where Kyle Busch passed Corey Heim on the last lap, which I gotta say, after all these years of, drivers I like in the lower series getting Kyle Busch in races and not being able to win, it was kind of satisfying seeing it happen to somebody who I think is overrated and off-putting and just, I mean, it seems like Heim just gets propped up as this, this great prospect, but from what I can tell, he's in the best truck and always has been. I think those Tricon trucks are just rocket ships that just have shitty drivers in all the other trucks. And so of course he looks good, but I mean, there's guys who are good at driving fast, and there's guys who are good at racing. And guys like Corey Heim, Christopher Bell, who he reminds me a lot of, they're good at driving fast. They're not good at racing, and that last lap proved that. And apparently in the Xfinity race, Josh Berry completely fucked up the last restart, and basically trailer trash went on to get a Mickey Mouse win. Glad I did not see that, but yeah, Barry is another guy who is going to be in for a rude awakening next year. Just really hope he doesn't end up being the same that Priest has been with, having this entitled attitude. But yeah, we don't need to go into the whole SHR thing again, but it really seems like, really two races between Xfinity and Cup this past weekend that just had the worst possible ending.
Yeah, I didn't see either of the truck race. I just watched the end of that later that night, and then I didn't see any of the Xfinity race, and because I was playing golf, and then I heard about what happened in the chat, and so when I saw that, I obviously had no interest in going back to watch it. Still haven't seen what happened, and I don't know. I probably won't go back and watch it.
Harry basically was leading on the last restart, totally blew it against Hill, who had older tires than him, and then on the last lap, tried to drive across the entire track and ended up wrecking himself.
Yeah, well, sounds right, but glad I didn't see it when it happened. And as far as what you said about Corey Heim, I don't have a lot to say about him specifically, other than, he's pretty much like just about every one of these Gibbs development drivers that come through the Toyota pipeline. They seem to all come from the same cookie cutter. They're almost completely interchangeable to me. Like, apparently, Jesse Love is a big prospect right now, and he's apparently already made quite a reputation for himself. And let's see, who else is it? Heim?
Bell.
Yeah, Bell. And
there's that other one guy who seems all right to me. I'm excited to see how he developed. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but William, who's not William Byron. He's the one guy who seems all right to me, and so that'll be interesting to see. Sammy Smith too, I guess. He's never really done anything to rub me the wrong way. I don't think he's that great, but yeah,
if they're not, Nemechek was the guy I was going to bring up. If they're not total jerks, then they're just completely uninteresting. That they all have the same traits, and there's almost nothing that even differentiates them for me. Not really much more to say beyond that.
I guess, should we talk about the weeks before that? We had New Hampshire, and then did we have another race before that?
We had, since the last show that we had at Chicago, we had Atlanta and then Loudon. So.
All right, Atlanta, yeah. Which was barely even a full race to me. I don't need to say my thing about shortened races again, but I will say, though, I think that the new Atlanta service really is, and I liked it last year, but I think it's gotten even better this year. That's even more of a shame that we couldn't get the full race in there, but excited to see that track for the next couple of years. Really the closest thing we will have to late 2000s Daytona again. Mm-hmm. And then Loudon, I just, typical kind of Loudon race to me. Good to see Truex finally get one there. But besides that, I can't really think of anything interesting that happened.
Yeah. Atlanta, on one hand, it was objectively a really good race until the end sequence that happened there, which we all know about. It unobjectively was a very miserable night for me because something happened to every single one of my guys that night. And at the time, it had some really bad consequences in the season-long championship. But since then, it's kind of turned around since that day. But it wasn't pleasant for me in that sense. But the racing was really good. I wasn't as big of a fan as the early part of it as maybe some other people because my feeling is that if we're going to have, like a super speedway race where there's going to be these crashes and all these different crazy things that happen, might as well go full out and see real pack racing when there's a lot, going on. And I guess in one way it was kind of nice to see a race that had more texture where you saw handling matter and guys were, it was kind of like a 90s plate race there. But I really liked it when it started to kick into high gear at the end of that first stage, and it got really crazy. And you saw that crazy run to the line that everyone had to try to win the stage. And then the race continued to be really good after that, where it was everyone kind of stayed together, and there was a lot going on, and that was very good. Unfortunately, it got pretty much ruined by the threatening weather and then the way the NASCAR handled it. But race control in NASCAR across all the series has been suspect. Like it's been noticeable for one thing in general, regardless of whether there's been weather coming or not, how long a lot of the cautions are taking. It's really, really annoying. It's gotten really bad this year, and just a bunch of the other decisions that they've made. I'm not going to go into a big thing about this because we already talked about the crux of it, but I believe that they held the yellow on the last lap of this Pocono race, for the drama, not just specifically because they wanted Dane to win, but they wanted him to win for the drama. I think that's why they held it, but you can't prove that. But regardless, whatever happened, it's just the latest in a long line of incompetent decisions that they've made this year. And I wasn't crazy about the previous race director that NASCAR had, but I would easily take him over what we have right now.
It's Elton Sawyer now, isn't it?
I don't really remember.
And whoever it is terrible. And the Atlanta thing, actually, thinking about it now, that did piss me off because what really pissed me off is, the next day everybody's, trying to justify it because, oh, remember Daytona last year when it rained? Yeah, okay, congratulations. That's one example in, decades of rain impacting NASCAR races where, there was a really big bad crash like that. That happens maybe once every 20 years. The last time before that was, I guess, that All-Star race that one time. But first off, Atlanta track isn't all packed, with cars nose to tail like it is at Daytona. They get spread out more, so you're not going to have the entire field wreck. Second of all, nobody even got hurt in that Daytona wreck for as much as we're painting it like it's like, some Le Mans 1955 type of thing. And third, I'm sorry, but if you have an entertainment product that's, no matter what you do, there's always going to be some level of danger involved. And you race until the conditions are just to the point where you can't anymore. If they would have just gotten 3 laps in before it started raining again, before heavy rain came, then those 3 laps are worth it. If you're just going to not race because, oh, it's about to start raining soon, and then just ride around under caution until it starts raining, then, why even race at all? Somebody could just as easily get hurt in completely dry weather, and it's just, just this playing not to lose mentality it seems like we have in society in general today that just really, really pisses me off. And it pisses me off when people defend it because, oh, well, here's the absolute worst case scenario that could have happened, even though that happened one time in the last 20 years. So, that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah, we talked about Daytona when it happened last year, and I knew it. We all knew it that right there was going to set the precedent that this was going to be the way it was going to happen every time going forward. Like, I think literally the week after that, they had this ridiculously long caution at Darlington for what was based sprinkles, or maybe not even that. And you knew
Yeah.
like right away it was going to be that way, and that's exactly the way it is.
And the other thing about Daytona last year is they didn't throw the caution until after it was already raining really hard for like an entire lap in that part of the track. It was like not raining in one part of the track and it was pouring down where they were going into and wrecking, and they had every opportunity to throw the caution for a full at least half a lap before that and didn't. So, you know, once it starts raining hard, then you throw the caution, but until then, you let them race. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I said, I mean, we could bitch about it all night, really, but I'm not going to change anything, so whatever. I basically agree with what you said about Loudon. Not much to say about that race. It was all right, not bad, not great. It was just a typical Truex steamroller. Most of the guys that you expect to do well and not do well at Loudon did exactly that there. It got a little bit messy towards the end, but thankfully it ended up not being too much of a circus. So that pretty much further solidified Truex as the driver of the season. At this point right now, I mean, Larson has definitely outperformed his equipment by more than Truex has, but overall, Truex has been the fastest, been the best throughout the course of the season.
Yeah.
That's where I'd leave it right now, which leads me to ask you if you got any kind of analytical stuff you want to get into this week.
No, but that did remind me though. I was going to had we done a show last week, I would have said a certain piece about Chase Elliott and that pathetic run that he had at New Hampshire that he somehow got a 12th place finish out of. Ran a little bit better this week. Actually, I thought that was maybe one of the most impressive runs he's had, along with Nashville and Fontana from before he got hurt, which really just kind of is a pretty bad indictment on how his season has gone, in spite of the fact that, he leads the series in average finish, amazingly enough. Just one more reason why that's one of the dumbest statistics that people, for whatever reason, take as if it's the gospel. But I remember a certain race last year where I forgot which one. It might have been after he was eliminated, but I really kind of went in on Kyle Larson and how, he was coming off this all-time great season where, he was supposed to be dominating every week, and people just kind of took that for granted, and then it was such a disappointment to so many people last year, myself included, that he just was basically a fifth-place driver all year. And, I talked about how, Chase was class of the field and owning him again, and Larson needed to wake his ass up if they were going to really be, the two guys of the next however many years. And now it feels like it's kind of been reversed in that way. Chase is having an even worse season than Larson last year, and the injury can't really use it as an excuse. He missed races and then missed another race for I won't get into that, but at this point, it's like I think the whole team needs something to change. That means Allen should be fired. I will just say that straight up. Should have been a long time ago, but he needs to go, but Chase needs to just needs to have a better attitude. He needs to start acting like he was acting, I guess, between Martinsville 2017 and up through 2020 when he really used all the adversity that he would go through and used it to make him stronger. And I thought that was the proudest I'd ever been to be a fan of his. It kind of feels like ever since Hendrick brought Larson in, and he's no longer just kind of the de facto clear-cut best driver at his team, and if anything, now both Larson and Byron kind of are posing a threat to him there. And it just seems like he's not really been the same ever since then in terms of his mindset. Even with last year having the great season he had for the first 26 races of it. And then now it's like, his cars aren't very fast. He's not really doing anything to make the most out of them except for somehow just backing into these finishes that are better than he runs every week. And, he's got this kind of Debbie Downer attitude all the time. And it's just like, if he misses the playoffs, then I really hope that's a wake-up call for the whole team, because I don't know what else there is to say at this point.
Yeah, a couple of things that I will say in his defense, is one, he's kind of a bit of a victim, as you said, of distorted expectations where, Kyle Larson had as all-time great season in 2021 and people expect it to just be that way. And, that's no one is going to have that kind of season on a regular basis. It's just not possible with the level of competition that there is in the sport. Anything that less than that is going to be a disappointment. And to a lesser extent, the same thing happened with Chase, where really, honestly, he was, in my opinion, the best overall driver last year. But, if you look at just the beginning and the end of the season last year, it really wasn't that much different than 2021 or even, parts of this year. It's just he was so good in the middle. That little stretch he had in the middle where he had the 1-2 finishes over and over again. He was 12-0 against teammates. That little stretch where he's dominating made people think that that's going to be the norm for his career. And while he's certainly capable of doing that for stretches, that's just not realistic to expect something like that on a consistent basis.
It's not, but, he's led 38 laps this year in 14 races. He's barely above average in TDR right now, 103. It's not the type of season that really any great driver of his caliber has.
Well, yeah. I'm not saying that he isn't underperforming, because he definitely is. But there's factors. So, and there's also the fact that they kind of seemed to avoid it 2 years ago, and then last year was just such an anomalous season in general that I guess it really didn't show up either. But this year seemed kind of returned the trend where Hendrick gets off to a really hot start, but then they kind of go into a summer mini slump, and Toyota becomes the fastest cars. And so up until this week, Hendrick has just not been very fast in general by their standards. And this was the first week where they really seem to have contending speed in a while. So those are things that have gone against him, but still, within a vacuum, he has kind of underperformed. And you brought up a point, and I've kind of mentioned it before, that Byron is kind of, for now, occupying the space that Chase traditionally does within kind of the hierarchy, not just of the team, but of the field in general. And the thing is that, as I said before, it's not just a petty insult. Some of it is, but a lot of it isn't to Byron, and that, all things being equal, Chase is a far superior driver to me, but all things are absolutely not equal right now, because, for one thing, the 24 is the best team in the sport right now, and Chase clearly has the worst team at Hendrick. One of the worst, outside the Hendrick equipment, it's probably one of the worst teams at a big name organization that there is in the sport right now. And I totally agree. Allen needs to go. It was great that Chase won the championship a few years ago, but the downside of it was it probably brought him years of more of job security. He's all right at maybe making initial setups, but he's terrible at adjustments. He's terrible at strategy. And it's not a new thing. It's been this way for as long as he's been a crew chief. Ask a Jeff Gordon fan about what it was like to be following him during that time when Allen was his crew chief. They'll tell you the same thing. And look, yes, he has a list of nice accomplishments, but look at who his drivers have been. He's literally only had all-time legends that he's been at the helm of. So
I saw something. A couple weeks ago that said he only has 38 wins in his crew chiefing career, and I'm like, geez, for as long as he's been around and the drivers that he's crew chief, that feels like it should be way more.
Especially as long as he's crew chief.
If a driver basically the caliber of, I think all the drivers he's had kind of combined are basically a top 10 driver of all time. And, if a top 10 driver of all time had 38 career wins in 19 years, no, that's, I've said it time and time again, he's basically just the Doc Rivers of NASCAR. He gets totally carried by all his drivers. And it's like the one year he didn't have an all-time great in his car, Casey Mears in 2008, was basically one of Mears' worst years ever, and basically got him booted from Hendrick. So, it's long overdue.
When you look at the fact that he's had, he's crew chiefed over 600 races in his Cup career, and to only have 38 wins with those drivers, yeah, that's definitely not a good look. Not saying that he's terrible, that he's the worst crew chief, but he's definitely not anywhere near high ranking.
And the other thing is, every single other Hendrick driver has gotten a shiny new toy in the past couple of years, going back to Larson with Daniels, and I guess he was there a little bit before that, but they really hit it off, and Byron with Fugle, and now even Bowman has pretty clear upgrade in my opinion over Ives, and Chase is still stuck with this guy who's basically a bygone era at this point. The sport's evolved and he hasn't, and it's time for something to change.
Yeah, like I was going to say, I mean, part of me, half of me actually would kind of like to see them in some fantasy world do a swap with Byron and Fugle so that, Chase could arguably have the best crew chief in the sport, and, and Byron would still be good, but
I would not wish that on Byron either. I know you might,
but then again, I mean, be careful what you wish for. I'm a Larson fan, and I don't want Chase to have the best crew chief either. So yeah, I mean, but he does deserve a lot better than he has right now. We can definitely agree on that. I was actually going to say something about comparing Larson's season to actually Chase's 2020 to feel similar, but we've gone on long enough, not enough time to really go over it. Maybe in another show we will if this bad trend continues for him, but what do you want to go into next, I guess?
I guess the next couple weeks, if you don't have anything else to talk about.
Do you want to talk about IndyCar? I didn't see it, but if you want to, you can.
No, just I didn't see either of the races this past weekend, but Newgarden is just, I mean, in a different universe on ovals at this point, and it's unfortunate that it seems like the championship is already in the bag. Speaking of guys who I feel like, the way you feel about Byron in NASCAR is basically me with Alex Palou in IndyCar. It feels like every time he wins a race or every time he gets to the lead, it's all on strategy. Usually jumps guys in the pits and then just drives off and runs and hides because he's got the fastest cars. He's not really good at actually racing people, and so it's a shame that that's pretty much in the bag, because I think Newgarden has impressed me a lot more this year. And I think Pato O'Ward is a more talented driver too. But we'll see how that goes when Palou apparently is going to be at McLaren next year. So hopefully Pato can finally, that team can finally get itself together for him to prove that I think he's better than Palou. And
yeah,
I didn't see anything about F1 either, but obviously I don't really watch that series. But I just gotta say, it's pretty satisfying to me that after all the hype in 2021 about how Drive to Survive was this huge thing, and all these F1 fans in America now are it's going to overtake NASCAR as the great American racing pastime, and then we just end up now with Max Verstappen dominating every week instead of Lewis Hamilton dominating every week. So, sorry about that. That year was the exception, not the rule, and I hope Max Verstappen wins like every single race for the rest of human history now, so that people can just get bored with it.
Yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. I'll just briefly mention it. I mean, this is the halfway point technically of the F1 season, but there's one new thing to add that's different from the start of the season, and that is, speaking of McLaren, that in F1, after an absolute atrocity of a start to the season, where they were legitimately the worst team on the grid in Bahrain, they've recovered to somehow become the second fastest team on the grid. Like Lando Norris has gotten back-to-back podiums. I think it might even be back-to-back second places, but at least back-to-back podiums. And they seem to, the attention that they were apparently not putting into their F1 program before, they seem to be reinvesting into it now. So, I mean, I guess it's good for the competition, but they're still lost by 33 seconds to Max on Sunday. So, still got a ways to go to have competition. Other than that, there's really nothing else to talk about. I mean, you can pretty much sum up the whole season really in about a 20-second clip that YouTube that I think anybody that really watches racing knows what I'm talking about, of the end of qualifying at Silverstone where the British guy was going nuts over Lando Norris taking the provisional pole, only to have his soul fall out when Max quickly took the pole back after. He's won 7 races in a row, 9 out of 11. He's already led over 530 laps this season in just 11 events, and there's really nothing else to say about that to add to, other than I loved your comment. I'm actually going to read it verbatim here that goes with what we said here. So glad we're back to reality with this 1%er country club show car exhibit disguised as a racing series after I was told 2021 was going to spark the beginning of it becoming the dominant racing pastime in the U.S. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, look, I'll watch F1 sometimes because, I love racing, and I'll take racing any way I can get it sometimes. But when you boil it all down, that really is what it is all about. And so, yeah. Nothing more to add then. So I guess we can go on to next week then.
Richmond, yeah. Which actually kind of a funny thing happened on our server the other day. We were making our picks for the race, and he said Richmond instead of Ryan picked whoever I picked. I picked Truex, and so my name on here now is me is Richmond at 98 instead of Ryan. So, yeah, I think hopefully it'll be just not a total Truex fest, but I kind of think I can't see how Truex and the Gibbs guys won't just dominate. Rather him than the other guy on that team, but hopefully Hendrick is able to prove that this week wasn't just sort of a fluke, and that they're really back to business. And I don't know what else to really expect. I guess Ford will probably be fast there since they tend to be on short tracks now.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's hard to see anyone beating Truex there right now.
Yeah. The Richmond race that we saw in the spring, which we talked about in our spring special episode, was definitely a huge improvement over what we've seen there recently. It was actually, I think, the race that had the most green flag passes there since they started keeping loop data in 2005. I don't expect this race to be as good as that, but hopefully it'll still be decent. As far as anything else goes, I am concerned because it's another damn Karen track, and so I got to worry about that this week, but hopefully it'll work out fine. Other than that, Truex is definitely a solid pick. He very well had a case to have won the race that happened in the spring before James Smalled. And, but of course, my hope is that Kyle Larson will repeat history. And in addition to the fact that he always seems to win the week after someone commits some grievous act against him, he also has been the short track king so far this year. He won both. He's won all 3 or 2.5, I guess you could say, of the paved short track races we've had this year. And I would like to see that trend continue, to see him, for one thing, just I want to see him win in general, but also to see him stick it to dummy. I really hate that he didn't win this race because I wanted to win on a new track. I guess you can add Pocono now to the list of places that Larson is absolutely snake bit at, along with Bristol Dirt and Darlington. And, well, until last year, Homestead. But, oh, well, it'll still take a win when you can get him. I hope he does. I'm not going to pick him because this last week was like the 4th time that I picked him to win a race, only to have him literally lose at almost the last possible instant. But I'm going to, if you want me to give a tentative pick, I think it's going to be a Bell weekend because we talked shit about him this week, and so therefore he's going to do well the next week. That's kind of how that tends to go. But, he's probably still not going to be able to wipe himself, but he may be able to drive a fast car to victory. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what our plans for are going to be, since we were supposed to have a show last week and didn't, and we're kind of a little bit off kilter and off schedule this week. So I guess we'll not talk about Michigan and just wait, either not talk about it at all or do it in the next show. I don't know what we're going to do. I know you've got a trip planned in early August, so I'm not sure how that's going to work out either.
We'll be totally off the grid pretty much the first week of August. It'll be whitewater rafting in the Grand Canyon, so a bit excited, also a bit nervous, but essentially will not be around that entire week to do anything on Twitter or watch any of the races or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I don't think I'll do a show next week. Maybe in 2 weeks, since you're going to be off, may try to have Adam or somebody be like the second or the co-host for that one, and see how that works out. I don't know. I don't want to miss too many weeks because we've already missed so much this summer. But if not a lot really transpires that's noteworthy in the next couple weeks, I guess it won't be too big of a problem. But I'm just going to tell you guys listening ahead that I don't know what our schedule is in the immediate future. It's up in the air because the way things have been around here have been pretty wonky, and so they're probably going to continue to be that way for the next little while. So I don't really know what to expect. So don't mean to leave it up in the air like that, but that's really how it is. So any last thoughts you have about anything really?
I guess maybe I'll briefly mention this whole project that we're doing on the server that I was probably going to post on Twitter when we're done. 100 greatest drivers list, I guess, kind of inspired by all the top 75 stuff that they've been doing this year. But this is for any series. So we've got lots of lower series drivers that have already been there. Today's number 69. Nice. It's, I guess, part of the reason I mentioned that. That's been fun seeing how that all unfolds in the end. I'll post that when we're done and maybe see if I can get any sort of healthy debate going. But we had a lot of basically every day we vote on a different position, and whoever gets the most positions gets the spot. So
oh, cool. Yeah, looking forward to it. So that does it for this show. Thank all of you guys listening for your support. Be sure to watch us on YouTube, obviously, as you're sure you're doing now. Like the videos, subscribe to us if you haven't already, and comment. That helps us more than anything in the algorithm. Ask us a question if you want to. Comment on something that you thought, liked, or didn't like about the show. Whatever, just any kind of engagement helps us. Follow us on Twitter at TRC Podcast 1. Follow Ryan and his advanced metrics and analytics at RJM Analytics. Again, I don't know what our schedule is going to be, when the next show is going to be, or what it's going to be like, but we'll be back at some point. Until then, thank all you guys for listening, and we'll see you around.